Hey there, YouTubers. Someone left me a message to explain the makings of this motorbike and were there any patterns. Well, there ain't no patterns because I built them from just whatever I can come up with. This particular one is an 8 horsepower motor from the city of Louisville. It was on an air compressor. My jack shaft pulley is a pulley off of a Mack semi's crankshaft. It wobbled a little and would throw off belts when it was on the semi at work, so we put a new one on. I brought the old one home, welded it to a pulley. I'll show you here. Get up close to it. It fit on a pulley just like it was made for. Tapped it on there, centered it up, and it doesn't wobble a bit. So I'm coming off of the torque converter style clutch to a 2-pulley Mack semi crankshaft pulley. Got some Maytag wash machine exhaust, a multi-speed back wheel. I ought to call this video how not to build a bike. One, these multi-speed back wheels, the spokes are closer together. The left bearing and the right bearing are so daggone close, it's really not a good thing, because all the leverage from the backmost sprocket, the biggest sprocket, out to the end, adds to the likelihood of you're going to bend the axle when you lay the power to it, because it's an 8 horse motor with a lot of torque. I even put a little cheater bar in here between the jack shaft and the back wheel, because with this top bar being bowed, it was actually flexing the daggone frame, and the chain would, when you laid into it, the chain would loosen on the bottom. Partly because the frame was bowing, partly because the axle was bowing, because there's like 1.5 inches of axle back in here before it ever gets to the bearing. On a regular 1-speed wheel, the bearing would be out here closer to the edge. It wouldn't be an issue. But I had these 2 aluminum wheels, which, in case you have never taken one apart, they're put together with 2 little pins right where my thumb is. Kind of cheesy, but hey, you use what's ever in the garbage if you're like me. Tight as a tick. Float type Briggs carburetor. Real cool little tank off of a mini bike. The frame was called a workmate or a workhorse or something like that, but it was not a Worksman. And I made the mistake of thinking it was going to be as tough as a Worksman, and it's thin as you know what. I popped holes all in it building this bike. Very thin. The only thing heavy on it's a front fork, kind of like a Schwinn fork. But it had no provision for a handbrake, so I welded 2 5/16, well, I think it's a 3/8 nut to put the handbrake on it. The twist grip's some kind of a moped grip. It's probably worth more to the proper person that has that style of moped than the whole damn bike is, but it ain't coming off. The brake is, it has 2 handbrakes, which would smoke when you tried to stop it. With all its weight and all its power and my 280 pounds, the shoes were melting on the rim. And stink was coming off of them. So I took 2 U-joint caps off of a semi, welded them to the front motor mount holes, front motor mount bolts, and hinged this lever off an old oddball riding mower with skirted fenders, some kind of real bizarre looking thing. And took a Kevlar belt. This back pulley has a Kevlar belt hooked to a chain, hooked to this pedal. When you push that pedal, it digs that belt into the back pulley. It's fastened at the top up here. Let's get a light on it. It's fastened to the top with a piece of copper tubing, and the belts drove down into copper tubing and smashed like a solderless connector, same way this end here is. Shit, let me get my light. Same way that end is. So it's not going to come off of that Kevlar belt. It stops the back pulley. Then a person said, well, how does it stop if that wheel has the ratcheting mechanism in it? And that's the answer to that is I learned this the hard way. Those sprockets are mounted in rubber. I didn't realize it. I weld the sprocket solid. Having a time getting my stuff in the right spot. That innermost sprocket, the little sprocket, is welded so the sprag system doesn't ratchet. It's as rigid as a motorcycle sprocket. Disregard the sprocket over there. That was a failed attempt to get my sprocket close to the bearing. I had this wheel in there backwards, thinking that I'd be closer to the bearing and less have to bend the axle. Well, it still bent the axle. So I got an axle out of a stunt bike that's a little more tempered. It seems to work pretty good, but you got to remember 8 horse. That's what Cushman's had, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but they were 7 or 8, I think. That's a lot of torque. If this were belt, it'd be a lot more forgiving. Wouldn't be as apt to cause a problem. But there are no directions or instructions. I don't know what I'm going to do when I build one until I get into it. It's just like my mom was growing up poor and all. She could get in the refrigerator and make a meal out of whatever was in there, and it would be good, but she didn't have any plans. She just did what she knew would work from past experience. And that's how I'm justifying building these junky old bikes. I found on a steel tank when I worked at Albert Oil, it said Southern Tank, Louisville, Kentucky, and I saved a little piece of one of the surrounds off the tank that held the little brass nomenclature plate and glued it on there just to be cheesy, just to look different. Wade Made Motorized Mayhem, that's the name of my YouTube channel. That's about all I can tell you about it. It's wicked, it's scary. The frame's not heavy enough, and this ain't, I wouldn't recommend anybody using a true worksman frame. Yeah, they're good. They're killer. They're tough. You ain't going to mess one of them up. But this one was called either a workmate or a workhorse, and it's deceiving. Those are the foot pegs, that piece of angle iron welded to the bottom of the socket where the pedal crank goes. They're a little bit far back, but it's not uncomfortable. If you think about it, a lot of motorbikes have the pegs back and not out in the front like all the custom chopper looking bikes have nowadays. And the front wheel, excuse me, even though it is a little skinny aluminum wheel put together with pins that I don't really care about, it does have the 3/8 axle instead of the 5/16 on the front, so I feel a little safer with my big butt when I'm flying down the street showing off way faster than I should be. I took it out to the Street Rod Nationals and down to the Beatersville Car and Bike Show, and if you lift your weight off the seat and kind of cheat a little, you can fry the living crap out of the tire. Had the smoke rolling and people filming left and right, but I haven't seen any of it on the YouTube videos, but it's out there somewhere. But just look at the size of the monstrosity. That's a lot of motor to be on a 26-inch bicycle. Looks wicked, is wicked, but it's also deadly. That sums it up. Hope you enjoyed this. Wade Made Motorized Mayhem or John's Motorized Bikes. When I make another video, you'll see them. Thank you. Bye-bye.